Hello, we are live. Okay, so this is a live debate with YouTuber ContraPoints. ContraPoints is a feminist YouTuber, and we have a lot of disagreements on trans issues, a number of issues, but today we're going to be sticking to mostly trans issues and several criticisms that he has of my channel and my presence online. And introduce yourself, Contra.
Yes, hello. I am a YouTuber who does videos mostly about gender and about race. And I have talked a lot of shit about Blaire on my channel, so it's very nice of her to have me on to discuss some of that.
Yeah, I think it'll be good. And then moderating, of course, I'm sure you guys recognize the face, is Shoe on Head.
Hi. Hello. So I'm friends with both these people, and I like both their content, so they figured that I would be an okay mod, and we'll see how that goes. So
yeah. So June will be here just to make sure that there's not too much interrupting going on and that both of us can get our points out and articulate what we're saying. And yeah, so she's friends with both of us. So to everyone who thinks that this is a biased moderator, she likes us both. So I'll start. I kind of just wrote a little something about my intentions for the stream.
Go ahead.
So I wanted this stream to happen because you seem to be one of my largest critics. You've done a video about me, and I've seen a lot of tweets about me on your end. You claim that I have indefensible views, that I'm a bully, that my audience are Nazis, and that you take issue with the fact that I've mocked trans people on my channel. You've also said that I have an oppressive mindset. And so I kind of just wanted you to go over a little bit, elaborate on your issues with me and my channel to start with.
Yes. So I'll say, to begin with, before really getting to the topic of the trans stuff, I kind of wanted to ask you, we can delay this for a second if you want, but I'm curious to know about sort of just what being transgender even means to you. Because before I start criticizing your view, I feel like maybe you've changed recently from a position where you used to kind of say that being trans was a kind of biological feature of neurology and psychology, and lately you've said a few times, you've characterized being transgender as impersonation or caricature. And you don't have to answer that now, but I just want to say that to me is a viewpoint that, I mean, if that's how you experience your gender, it's not at all it's not at all appropriate for me to say that you should do your gender differently or that you should adopt a different view towards yourself. But that view of trans people as impersonators or as caricatures is, to me, almost the definition of transphobia. And so, to me, you publicly advocating this view, not just as a description of who you are and how you feel about your own gender, but as a kind of thing that you insist that all trans people are, or otherwise they're delusional. To me, that is damaging to trans people, and it is a basic reinforcement of a lot of non-trans people's transphobic beliefs. So that is sort of the core criticism. And then the bullying accusation has to do with the way you go about this.
Can we address the first one first so that we don't lose people?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think you have a few misconceptions about my views on transgenderism. I think that when I say that you are, assuming the characteristics of a woman, I don't mean that you are an impersonator, like you're a clown, like you're an act in that sense. I mean that when you undergo hormone therapy, when you consume synthetic hormones, when you undergo surgeries to alter your bones, or you implant something in yourself to attain a body feature that is biologically impossible otherwise, that is imitating body parts that are biologically impossible for you. So for me, it's more of a stepping outside of myself, being able to concede the fact that, of course, I am biologically male, but in the pursuit of my own happiness, I choose to transition to assume characteristics that are not natural for me.
But in what sense is
I don't think that.
In what sense is that really biologically impossible? I mean, even if you
it's biologically impossible in the sense that, think of breast implants. If you don't have breast implants and you are a male to female transgender person, then unless you had, you know, a ton of breast growth from hormones, you're, you know, assuming a characteristic that is not naturally occurring on you. Taking synthetic hormones for female secondary sex characteristics to appear on a male.
But many
so
the hormones, no matter what sex you are assigned at birth, they work through the same biological pathways. Your body has the capacity to adopt, to have this, to grow the secondary sexual characteristics of either gender, and it's simply a matter of activating that through hormones.
Well, yeah, that's why I said otherwise.
As for the idea of implants, I mean, plenty of cis women do that too. So, to me, it's not. But to characterize it, why is it impersonation of a different gender as opposed to just expression of the gender that you are?
I don't think I've ever called it impersonation. I really don't think I've ever called it.
I think on Twitter you've called it impersonation, but I think you use that term in your debate with Lacey, your caricature, which is, I mean, you suggested that you think trans women are not real women. Again, you just used the word imitation a second ago. So
I prefer in my life, when I am discussing transgender issues, to differentiate between trans women and women because they are different. You can recognize both and it doesn't diminish one or the other. Especially
so I can recognize that there are certain situations where you would want to distinguish between the two, especially when it comes to healthcare, where there's going to be different healthcare needs. But socially and psychologically, I don't see what purpose there is for making that distinction.
Well, okay, socially, we're on the internet, right? When we talk about these things, we're often going into the nitty-gritty of things. We're talking technically, and we're talking, you know, trying to be as objective as possible. Of course, in my life, socially, it's completely inconsequential. There's no reason for me to ever concede unless it's, you know, a doctor situation that I'm biologically male. However, if someone is questioning, I mean, you know very well, there are people out there, there are YouTubers specifically as well, who advocate for this idea that trans women are not biologically male. I mean, that's just false. It's just false. And so when we're talking about we're having conversations online, it's worth speaking technically and it's worth mentioning. I don't go to the grocery store and someone calls me ma'am. I don't correct them and be like, well, you know, I'm actually biologically male, so it's kind of appropriate, but not really. Like, no, that's not how it works. But we're talking about things technically.
So I guess two ways to respond to that. One is that if you do acknowledge, as I acknowledge, that you are a woman in every meaningful everyday sense of the term, why use this language about not being a real woman or about being an imitator? And the other response is that in what sense are you fully biological male if you've undergone hormone replacement therapy? In some senses, you have sexual characteristics of a woman. So why insist on like this born male at birth and that can never be changed thing, when in fact you can and do change your biology?
You can alter certain aspects of your biology, but you can't alter the fact that you were born male and will die male. That's just is what it is. Again, we're talking technically. So you're saying, why do you insist on this? Well, it's because there's a lot of people that I encounter online when I have these debates and these conversations that would never concede that trans women are biologically male. And so it's worth stating. Ultimately, and that's why
what does it mean to be biologically male? I mean, again, I suspect that the direction this is going to be back to just like, oh, that's what the doctor assigned you at birth, or oh, you have XY chromosomes. But as I discussed in my most recent video about gender, this biological binary is actually not all that straightforward of a distinction, especially when you get to, you know, someone who, if you have XY chromosomes, but you're taking estrogen, you're taking hormones, and you develop female secondary sex characteristics.
Yes, I mean you can, like I said.
Why say that you're biologically male?
Because I am. You're born with male chromosomes. You're born with a penis. You're born with a scrotum. You're biologically male. I'm in many ways, I believe in biological realism, but I'm also not, you know, a biological absolutist, you know, or what's the term? I forget the term, but I don't believe that there are things you can't change or that you should be a slave to your biology. Obviously not. I've taken upon myself to change things in the pursuit of my own happiness. But if there are people online that I'm arguing with who are insisting that trans women are not biologically male, I'm going to correct them because they are.
I mean, it just seems to me that biology is more complicated than either you're male or either you're female. I think that, you know, there's male picks out a cluster of attributes like your chromosomes, your hormones, your primary and secondary sexual anatomy. And it seems to me that once you've changed some of that, you're less of a biological male, at the very least, less of a biological male than you were. So I don't see, I feel that the insistence on binary terminology actually doesn't clarify things. But I also think this is maybe not the most important point here.
It isn't the most important point, but I will say it actually is worth clarifying. You go to a doctor and you're looking to transition, an endocrinologist, you're going to say, I'm going from male to female. If that's the case, you're going to say, I'm going from female to male.
Yes.
You can't say, I'm going from kind of male to kind of female, so give me like a little bit of hormones, but not a lot. Like, you go from one end to the other. That's just life. That's how it is. And if you're trans, that's what it is. So,
but if it's, again, if it's male, why continue insisting that you're always and forever a male? I mean,
biologically speaking, this is, let me try to summarize this the best that I can. I think this is the best way to explain how I view my existence and trans people's existence. Like I said, I believe in biological realism. I believe that if you're born male, you die male. It just so happens that you and I live in a Western society that affords us certain freedoms. Some of those freedoms include hormones and therapy and things that you can change. And, you have that autonomy within yourself. And we also live in a society that most people, the majority of people, are kind enough to where if they see someone who is male to female or transsexual, they're just going to refer to them as a woman because that's how it works. But there's a difference between people affording kindness to you and referring to you, by a pronoun that's not that of your biological sex, and you actually changing something. No, technically, you cannot change your sex. You can live as the other sex socially, and that's the point.
So it seems that you do then make a distinction between sex and gender, where sex is biological and gender is social or psychological. Yeah.
No. I don't separate gender and sex in that way. I know a lot of people do, and I'm sure we could go.
But then but if you don't separate them, then how can you be a woman but a biological male?
I didn't say you could be a woman and a biological male. I think that the term trans woman, is perfect, and that's a word that represents a person's social standing. I don't think that means that, sex and gender are completely different. I don't think that means that someone's sex can be male and someone's gender can be a woman. I think that
it seems to me that the concept of being transgender, as it's usually understood, is just not something that you believe in. I mean, and maybe that's the case, since you do seem to prefer.
It's something that you believe you are. No, I mean,
sexual. Yeah. Well, so being the most conventional understanding of what it means to be transgender is that your gender is the one that you psychologically identify with, and your sex is the one that you're assigned at birth. And that's obviously something that's disputed and debated a lot, but it's the most conventional understanding of it.
But that's actually not the definition of gender dysphoria, which is the mechanism in which someone actually identifies as something that they aren't. Gender dysphoria is binary. Gender dysphoria is defined as a persistent and strong identification with the opposite sex, not gender.
It's not binary. I mean, so this is bringing in the non-binary issue. But according to the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, and according to the APA, both APAs, American Psychological and American Psychiatric Association, there is non-binary dysphoria, and non-binary or gender nonconformity is recognized. So I don't know why you insist that it's a strictly binary thing, as if that were the psychiatric consensus, when the psychiatric consensus is the opposite.
Because gender nonconformity is not the same thing as gender dysphoria or being transgender. Everyone, to some extent, has some level of gender nonconformity. It's not the same thing.
Maybe so, but there are varying degrees of gender nonconformity, and some of it is bad enough that it warrants, I think, an additional label. And the American Psychological Association, anyway, has decided that it's bad enough that it warrants inclusion in its very definition of what it means to be gender.
So the term non-binary is in DSM.
I don't know. I think it is in the DSM. I'm not 100% sure, but it's in literature that's produced by the American Psychiatric Association and American Psychological Association. I mean, it's widely accepted in psychiatric practice now that there can be people who are not gender binary.
What's widely accepted is there are people who are gender nonconforming. There are people who struggle with their gender. That doesn't mean that non-binary is included. Non-binary is a term that, everyone says this as a joke. It was literally spawned off of Tumblr.
But that's simply not correct. It's in, so non-binary, I believe, the dysphoria, non-binary dysphoria, I believe, is in the DSM.
I'll check for everybody.
Again, if you look at, for instance, I have in front of me it's the Guidelines for Psychological Practice with transgender and gender nonconforming people. This is from the APA. the first sentence is transgender and gender nonconforming people are those who have a gender identity that is not fully aligned with their sex assigned at birth. I mean, the wording is specifically designed
but it's not non-binary. Non-binary, I mean, maybe you have a different definition of non-binary than every other person on the internet who talks about it, but that's not what non-binary is. I mean,
well, to me, non-binary would be gender nonconforming in a way that doesn't specifically identify with the other sex. So an agender person is non-binary, a person who's gender fluid or genderqueer is non-binary.
That's not the same thing as gender nonconformity. When it comes to diagnosing people in general, they look at, you know, the person not conforming to their gender. That doesn't mean they're non-binary. I think that's completely different. I think non-binary gender identities, you know, they're completely fabricated. The reason the term is not in the DSM, it's not in scientific literature. I mean, I've looked extensively trying to find a biological basis for non-binary people, and it's just not, it just isn't there.
Yeah, so what I have in front of me is it's a document called Guidelines for Psychological Practice. Guidelines for Psychological Practice of Transgender and Gender Nonconforming People. Bullet point number 1 is Guideline 1. Psychologists understand that gender is a non-binary construct that allows for a range of gender identities that a person's gender identity may not align with sex assigned at birth.
But
I mean, this is the American Psychological Association in 2015.
But you realize that transsexualism exists outside of the theory that gender is a social construct. Transsexualism is biological. So non-binary is not. So I don't have a problem with, you know, you've mentioned before that you want to create a space in which you can identify as non-binary because that's where you feel comfortable. And I don't have any issue with that. I don't have an issue with people calling themselves anything. I just don't like the insistence that non-binary genders, because it's not just non-binary gender identities. People make the case for non-binary genders being as many genders as you want.
I'm not sure I understand the relevance of the distinction between non-binary identity and non-binary gender.
Because, I mean, you can have as many gender identities as you want, but you can also talk about how the fact that there's multiple genders within between male and female, that just doesn't make sense. There's no biological basis for that. There just isn't.
But the argument is not that there is a biological basis for it. The argument is that insofar as we construe gender as a social and psychological
I've seen a lot of people.
Blaire, let him finish.
I mean, so again, like the argument is not, as people sometimes claim, and as sometimes advocates misleadingly suggest, the argument is not that gender non-binary people are intersex. I mean, there are also intersex people, but the point is that, like, I, for instance, am aware that biologically, like, I'm male in every significant sense, but so it's a matter of social and psychological.
But if you're able, despite the fact that, from what I've understood from the things that you've said, you don't necessarily identify as male. Is that correct to say?
Not in the social and psychological sense. I understand that biologically, I am, of course, a male.
Okay, so then
any anatomist would characterize me that way.
Right. So what is the contention with me conceding that I'm biologically male when you're able to do the same thing? I don't understand that. Like, that was such a big issue for you that I would call myself biologically male.
Because I mean, I don't want to like pry too much into the specifics of your transition, but you, I assume, have taken hormones and done other things to alter your biology, which I have not. But also, I don't see, you seem to be you want to draw a sharp distinction between transsexuals and non-binary people, which seems to be based.
Because there is.
But I agree, but I don't see how you can make that distinction if you think that even transsexuals are biologically the same sex they are assigned at birth. That to me seems to erase the distinction.
No, it absolutely doesn't. Transsexualism is just a state of identifying with the opposite sex and taking it upon yourself to medically transition, alter yourself to appear as the opposite sex. You're not changing your sex. Even if you were to get a sex change, you're flipping your male genitalia inside to resemble a vagina. You don't actually get a vagina. That's my point. You can't actually change it. You can merely live as and be recognized by perfect strangers as such. Does that make sense?
I sort of don't understand the, like, you can't actually have a vagina. Like, I don't understand like what this language is accomplishing apart from invalidating the physical bodies of trans people.
Like I said, in real life, it probably doesn't accomplish much. But when we're sitting here talking about the technicalities of this conversation, then yes, technically it's not an actual vagina. You can't actually.
Like, what do you mean technically it's not actual vagina? It's not a vagina that developed like congenitally? Like, I mean, but
yes, it is literally a wound that is created, and you have to dilate yourself to keep the wound open so that it never closes. And eventually you can stop dilating. You don't dilate forever.
This seems like a way of characterizing it that comes from a place of some level of disgust with the whole process. It's a matter of how you're choosing to evaluate it.
That's something that you're placing upon me, that I think that diminishes someone who does get a sex change, or that,
people generally don't like thinking of their genitals as a wound.
It's not true. Just because I'm able to step outside of it and objectively look at what it is, doesn't mean I have disgust for it. Doesn't mean that I.
But in what sense is this objective? I mean, it seems to me that language, like
the fact that you
wounding yourself, like this contains a kind of evaluation of it that's not entirely scientific.
It's absolutely scientific. It's objective in the sense that it's not an actual functioning vagina. It is a wound made to resemble a vagina that stays open so that you can have intercourse in it, but it's a wound.
Then in what sense is it not functioning? I mean, you can have intercourse in it, so it's functioning. I mean, you can't have a baby out of it, but like, who wants to have a baby
out of it? You can't lubricate. It's a wound. A wound is not the same thing as vagina. That's just being objective about it. A wound is not the same thing as a vagina. So, I mean, listen. I would never talk to someone who had the surgery and described it as a wound to them. I think that would be really rude.
But why are you describing it like that now?
Because it's the internet, and we're talking about it technically speaking. Because you have this opinion that you can change your sex, and if I disagree with that opinion, I'm going to back it up by saying, well, technically you actually can't change your sex. You can only resemble the opposite sex to the best of your capacity. There's a difference there. And again,
it just seems to me that you have there's like a needless like tone of derogation that you have when you talk about transgender people, transsexual people, intersex people who you refer to as deformed. It just seems that you persistently adopt these aesthetic
listen, I have described the intersex condition as a deformity. If you are born with a vagina and a scrotum, or a uterus and a penis, that's a deformity. I'm sorry.
Deformity is not a scientific category.
Hold on.
Just let Blaire talk.
You are placing something on me that I think that because it is a deformity, that I am using that as, a derogatory term because I'm able to look at that as a deformity. It's what any doctor would call it. You're born with an abnormal body part, or a body part that's not technically supposed to be there. It's a deformity. If I was born with 6 toes on one foot, that's a deformity. It doesn't mean it's a bad thing.
Supposed to be there. See, there's this language of like what should be that is introduced instead of just describing like what is like natural. So you take what you think is natural or what is typical, and then you turn that into this like normative language.
It's not what I think is typical. It's not what I think is typical. People have 5 toes on their feet. That is typical. That is 99.9% of people have fucking 5 toes on their feet. So if you're born with 6, that's a deformity.
And
you're placing this on me that I look down on people who may have a deformity, and it's not true. And the only reason why I classify intersex, not even just me, doctors classify it as a condition, as a deformity, is because people try to make the argument that intersex is a third gender when it's actually a condition. And so what happens?
Well, they don't make the argument that it's a third gender.
What happens is
outside of the binary sex classification.
What happens is people make this argument that intersex is a third gender, right? And then
I've never heard anyone say it's a third gender. It's a third sex, maybe, or it's a non-binary sex.
Okay, third sex. Okay, third sex. Lacey Green herself made the argument that it's a third sex on my stream. Okay, people make that argument. So then I'm now in the corner like, well, yeah, I could just let them say that, or I could say, well, technically, being someone who tries to remain objective, I can say, well, actually, that's not a sex. That's actually a condition people are born with. And then what happens after that is that you look at that and say, wow, you think they have a deformity? You think they have a condition? It's like you're placing that negative connotation on it for me. And I don't think of it that way.
But the only distinction.
I don't think of intersex people as less than me. I don't think of transsexuals as less than anyone else.
I mean, the only distinction
because I'm not a horrible person
between an actual sex and a deformity seems to be the frequency that it occurs at. But it seems that from the fact of intersex being atypical, you sort of add to this. I mean, again, I don't know why you choose to use the word deformity. And even if you were to insist that deformity is a scientific term, which I don't really think it is. I mean, some intersex people don't have any physical manifestation of it. Like, so I described something called Swyer syndrome in my latest video, which is basically people who have an XY chromosome, and there's a part of that Y chromosome that never is activated at that critical prenatal stage, so they don't develop testes or a penis or any of that. So they are born with a vagina, with uterus, with fallopian tubes, and are sexed female at birth. But so they don't appear to be deformed in any sense. It's just that they have a chromosome.
You don't have to appear to be deformed to have a deformity. You can have an internal deformity.
I think the issue here is the word deformity. It sounds really negative. So
yeah, but
condition.
But even condition, people would have an issue with that. It's like, I feel like I'm constantly.
We'd have less of an issue with condition than deformity.
I don't want to vent, but I feel like I'm constantly someone who, you know, I try to be as objective as possible when I'm talking about these things. And then so I use words that people just have an issue with. People have an issue with the word imitate when you're imitating body parts as a trans woman of a biological woman. So then I say, okay, what about mimic? What about trying to replicate? It's like, is it just a matter of me not using the word that you want? Is it just a matter of what word hurts your feelings the least? Not necessarily you, but people in general who come from the same sort of mindset as you. Is that really just what it is?
Suggestion? I mean, so suppose that you were we were not to talk about the biological aspect, but about the expressive aspect. So, like, you know, again, you might say, would you say that a transgender woman who's wearing lipstick and eyeshadow and so on is emulating or imitating a cis woman? I mean, because you would never say that cis women. I mean, so actually, some feminists like Judith Butler would say that gender is basically imitation, everyone imitating everyone else. Trans people and cis people included. Well, you seem to think that it's only trans people who are.
I've heard that take before. It's interesting, but no, I don't think that makeup is, you know, if a biological male or trans woman is wearing makeup, they are imitating something. However, you are striving to achieve, whether you want to call it a beauty standard or, you know, a look that is not going to naturally occur on you. If you are pumping your hips full of silicone so that you have female typical hips, you are trying to replicate, mimic, imitate the hips of a biological female. That's just what it is. And so
you're trying to have a woman's hips because you're a woman. You're not trying to, like, it's not that you're not a woman and you're trying to imitate them. Like, you are also a woman, right?
Your internal sense of self can definitely be that of a woman. My internal sense of self is absolutely that of a woman, which is why I chose to transition and why I chose to make changes. But so your internal sense of self, you're
just being yourself. You're not imitating cis women.
Yes, I'm absolutely being myself. But when it comes to trying to attain body parts that I was not born with or that do not naturally occur on my body without the consumption of synthetic hormones or surgical intervention, you're absolutely trying to replicate a body part that wouldn't be there, that belongs to a different sex. I mean, I don't understand what's inherently derogatory about saying that. Like, people have been blowing up over this the past 24 hours. I don't understand that. I'm not comparing them to drag queens because trans women do live as women. Drag queens dress up and perform. I understand there's a huge difference there, but I don't understand the issue with the word replicate or mimic or imitate, because that's what you're doing.
I think one of the reasons that people take such issue with it, one of the reasons I take such issue with it, is that this way of talking about trans women is often used against them. Like, it's often, so again, like when you're, the people who advocate against trans women's right to use the bathrooms that belong to their sex, or the people who advocate against, you know, feminists who advocate for the inclusion of trans women in women's spaces, have to struggle against this suggestion that trans women are somehow impersonators, or they're men in women's clothing, or they're like, you know, so again, like, the thing is, like, this is exactly what trans exclusive radical feminists say.
The thing is, Germaine Greer says,
she called them, you know, trans women grotesque parodies or something. And so this argument is used to suggest, you know, yes, by trans exclusive radical feminists, but also by, you know, conservative commentators and things, to suggest that trans women are really kind of like men sort of like invading femininity or imitating it or doing an impersonation of it. But it's used to discredit their womanhood, right? It's used to invalidate that they actually are the gender that they identify with.
Listen, things can be weaponized.
Has that connotation.
I think we can all agree that TERFs are the worst. So let's move on.
Yeah, I think we can.
Sorry, Blaire, what were you going to say?
June, you made me lose my train of thought. So let me just try to break this down, Contra. It sounds like much of your issue with me is just the language I use, that the language I use isn't kind enough. Is that, would that be fair to say?
Well, I mean, it's more than it's not being kind. I mean, often you use language in an unkind way, but you also sometimes do it in a way that's misleading. I think so. So calling trans women imitators, that's to me, it's not.
I have never described a trans woman as an imitator. I just haven't. Like, and you keep saying that word, but I haven't. I've said that they attempt to imitate body parts that don't naturally occur on their bodies, because that's what you're doing. That's, in my view, the way I view it, that is what you're doing. If you're pumping your hips full of silicone, you're trying to imitate the hips of a biological woman. It doesn't have to diminish you. It doesn't mean anything bad. It's just in the same way that like a biological woman getting breast implants, if they just have naturally small boobs, are trying to imitate the look of having large boobs. That's what you're doing.
But
there's nothing inherently wrong about that.
You've used the word caricature, and caricature is just parody or exaggeration or something grotesque. I mean, like, so the words you choose, they have they matter. It matters what words you use, because words mean something and they have connotations. And they
listen. I'm not going to admit to ever using the word imitator because I haven't, but I can concede that the word caricature probably wasn't the best word. Okay. And if I was using that word, what I'm referring to is you are trying to mimic body parts. Okay, if you're going through surgery to rearrange your penis to resemble that of a vagina, or even if you want to say turn it into a vagina, which I have a problem saying that because it's not technically true, but if you say that, that's not inherently, it doesn't diminish you. Everyone does different things. I mean, people, I feel like people often, you and your followers in particular, love to place, a lot of words in my mouth and just put connotations there that I didn't put there. And maybe, I say things not in the best way sometimes. I know in particular that word caricature was said in the middle of a 3-hour live stream, not making an excuse, but I can admit it wasn't the best word. But this view that I attack trans people or try to diminish them or try to make them feel bad about themselves, it's just not true. I don't want to live in a world where that happens. I am trans, okay?
Well, what about the persistent misgendering of people like Riley Dennis? I mean, this is where
it's not people like Riley Dennis, it's just Riley Dennis. And I guess Milo Stewart as well. But here's
why?
The thing. I can promise you right now, you have never seen me call a transsexual woman he. I have never intentionally done that. Huh?
But you do call transgender women he.
So you're trying to put a distinction here between so you think Riley is transgender but not a transsexual?
It seems to me that you place, so sometimes in medical and academic literature, there is this distinction that's made between transsexual, which is someone who is interested in surgery and hormones and so on, and transgender, which is simply someone who has, at the psychological level, identifies with a different gender.
Let me just explain why I do not refer to Riley Dennis as she and her. I feel like I always talk about this. Like, I honestly think it's annoying that I have to, but I will.
Well, you could not misgender people, and then you wouldn't have to talk about it.
No, yeah, but here's the thing. I don't call actual transsexuals by a gender they don't want to be called. I think that's rude. I think doing that intentionally is rude.
Okay, so but you decided that Riley is not.
Well, let me finish. I'm trying to explain why I do this. I in no way register Riley Dennis in my mind as a female. For me to call Riley Dennis she or her would take a lot of effort. And you know what? There's an argument to be made that maybe I should make the effort. Maybe I should be nicer. There's always room to be nicer.
How hard is it? It's not. It's easier than paying your taxes or going to the bank.
Wait, let her finish.
Let me finish.
Sorry, guys.
I don't call Riley Dennis she because Riley Dennis has not transitioned. Riley Dennis has made absolutely no attempt to live as the gender that Riley Dennis wishes to be called. I also don't call Riley Dennis she because I reject the authoritarianism surrounding his entire worldview, that if you don't say it, that you're a horrible, evil, bigoted person.
I mean,
and so it's kind of like, throwing the ball right back over the fence at Riley. Like, actually, no, I'm not a horrible person, but I don't have to call you this. You don't have to force me to say something that I don't want to say. That's why I do that. If I will tell you right now, the day Riley Dennis goes on hormones, the day Riley Dennis puts on a female article of clothing that's not a jersey like he wears in every video, I will start calling Riley Dennis she. I really will. But until then, I don't feel like
you put yourself the arbiter of who's trans.
Okay.
No, I am not the arbiter.
Let just Contra say what.
And I don't. So I don't. You seem to say that in your perception, like there's certain things that someone can do that if they do these things, then okay, they're now officially trying hard enough that I'll acknowledge them. But I mean, why not respect? Like, what is the point in intentionally disrespecting someone's own pronoun preferences?
I am not.
Like,
I am not the arbiter of what a trans person is.
Okay, then why are you misgendering them and telling them who they are?
There are things completely out of my power that actually describe a trans person. Someone who transitioned is a trans person. It would kind of be like,
okay, but what is it like? What are the criteria for transitioning? How many of the boxes do you have to check?
Here is an example I want to give you. It would kind of, to me, I mean, you're speaking to someone who is trans. You are not trans, to my knowledge. You don't call yourself trans. You call yourself a crossdresser. So
I don't call myself a crossdresser. I used to. I call myself genderqueer. I don't call myself a crossdresser anymore.
Oh, okay. Okay, then we'll go with genderqueer. But either way, your life and my life, very different in terms of gender and the fact that I've trans. Like, our lives are just very different. Okay.
I'm sure they are.
Yes, and I'm not even talking about in general. I'm talking about when it comes to being trans and your genderqueer. Those are very different things. Okay. To me, it would kind of be like you sitting here telling a Black person that if you don't respect Rachel Dolezal and refer to Rachel Dolezal as an African-American woman, then you are being an asshole, you're being a bigot, you're wrong for that. It's kind of like, I don't know, who are you really to tell me that I have to refer to Riley Dennis as a trans woman when Riley Dennis himself has not made any effort to actually assume that role in society? That's what I really view this as.
Riley largely does assume that role in society, first of all.
No.
Second of all, I think that this is a spurious comparison between trans people, between genderqueer people and Rachel Dolezal. I don't think I think that any comparison between the trans thing and the race thing is complicated.
No, I'm not conflating transgenderism with.
No, but you are conflating non-binary or gender non-conformity.
No, I'm not conflating transgenderism with transracialism, which isn't even a thing. What I'm conflating is the expectation for someone who, you want me to just say this because you don't want me to be an asshole to Riley. It'd be kind of be like you telling an African-American woman to refer to Rachel Dolezal as an African-American woman, otherwise you're a bigot. She's not an African-American woman. Riley Dennis is not a trans woman. That's just what it is. I'm not the arbiter of it. Things have definitions outside of me. I didn't wake up and decide this is what a trans woman is. This is my book. This is Blaire's law. It just is what it is. Certain things are certain things. There's classifications for things. Riley Dennis, in no sense of the word, can be classified as a transsexual. Like, so
to you, like female pronouns are just this reward you get for taking hormones and
no, it's not a reward. I wouldn't view myself as giving Riley a reward. Like, oh, you have to pass this.
But why do you have to earn it in this way?
Huh?
Why do you have to earn it in this way that you have decided on?
It's not about earning it. It's not about earning it. It's about moving through society as a woman or moving through society as a man. Riley Dennis does not, from his own words, does not experience gender dysphoria, has not transitioned, and still wants to operate through society being called a woman. Do you think that's honestly reasonable for perfect strangers to just call Riley Dennis she and her? When Riley Dennis, we might disagree with it. We might disagree on this part. Riley Dennis does not physically resemble a woman in any way. Riley Dennis can't walk into the store and have people call Riley she and her. It's just not how it works.
I think she presents as somewhat ambiguous. To say my judgment about it, but I think that how someone presents is not really the main story. I mean, if someone psychologically identifies,
it is though. That actually is how pronouns work. Pronouns for 99.9% of the world are not a thought process.
You think
pronouns are a quick assessment of what a person looks like based on secondary sex characteristics and making a snap, not even a judgment. It's not even a thought.
Okay,
if you see someone and they register as female in your mind, you refer to them as such. It's just, it is what it is.
Then again, a cross-dresser who passes very well will be she just as much, it puts them on the same level.
That's the point. That is the point.
But it just sounds to me like you're putting passing at the center of this. That it's passing.
No, it's not. Again, no.
But why not?
Okay, this is another thing that you place on me that first of all, I don't think.
Okay, guys. Take deep breaths. We gotta calm down. Okay.
Okay. Let's just bring it down.
Bring it down. Okay. So basically, it's just Blaire's opinion. She's not saying other people shouldn't see Riley as that, and then Contra says it's easy to just, be nice. So I think that's what is going on here.
And listen, I would never argue there's not more room to be nice, okay? But at some point, you also have to take a stand for things. I mean, like I said, I made that comparison between forcing a Black woman to refer to Rachel Dolezal as another Black woman. I don't feel like I should have to be forced to refer to someone who has not transitioned like as a trans woman. I just don't.
Some kind of
the same way that before I transitioned, and I kind of had a little bit of an androgynous look since I was like 13, but there were times where I would still go into certain social circles and they would just automatically call me he, right? I never got up in arms about that because I presented as he, even though I had, you know, did my hair how I wanted and maybe wore a little bit of concealer or whatever, I still presented as he. So I couldn't have a gripe with someone referring to me as that because that's how they registered me.
So this is why it seems to me like you're placing emphasis on passing, because you say how you presented is how people refer to you, and you seem to think that's a fair system. You get the pronouns of how you present.
No, I think a fair system is, if you're trying, you can absolutely be called what you want. Because, you know, I have trans friends who, I hate even talking about passing. It's like obnoxious and it's always arbitrary. And I can honestly say, maybe you don't believe me, I've never really even talked about passing on my channel ever. I don't think I've ever used the word, okay? But I have trans friends who maybe could be described as they don't pass, okay? Maybe because of height or whatever have you. But they go in certain circles and people can see that they're making an attempt. They are dressed completely as women. People are kind enough to just call them what they assume they want to be called. And that's a great system. It just works. Riley Dennis, I've never seen Riley Dennis wear a female article of clothing ever. Have you? He always wears like jerseys and like racer back like thick tank tops.
I'm not good. What is the difference between a female and male article of clothing? Like, I mean, see again,
there are clothes that are designated for men and women. Okay, and part of transitioning.
It places the entire burden onto expression as opposed to on psychology or even biology. I mean, like again, if someone's taking hormones but they're still wearing men's clothes, you know what I mean? Like, I just don't see why that is the big thing for you. And I just don't see why it's like, I don't know.
It's a big thing because I've lived my life as a transsexual and I know how this works. Okay, you go out in society and people register you a certain way in their minds. That's just how it works.
I mean, I understand that as a fact of how social situations in fact are, people do make these judgments based on how you look. Yes, but is that like is that as far as we need to go? Is that the most enlightened view? If you know someone and they prefer different pronouns, they're not
I absolutely conceded.
I mean, why not call them by the pronouns they prefer?
No, I've absolutely conceded that there is room to be nicer. Like, I'm not painting myself as.
But you say there's room to be nicer, but then you don't do it.
Because again, you're asking me to be nicer, and put aside properly classifying things and how I actually register Riley Dennis in my mind. I'm sorry. I mean, you're asking me to set aside a lot just to like refer to someone as a woman when they're making no effort. It's almost impossible. That's just how I see it. And I feel like every argument devolves down to something about Riley Dennis.
Well, people don't like it when you misgender them or other people. So
how's this? I don't misgender transsexuals. I don't. I think that's rude.
Well, that's a good start.
Intentionally doing that is rude, and I don't do it. Riley Dennis doesn't fall under that.
I think it's rude to do it to Riley Dennis too.
Well, it's not my view, and I'm sure we could go in circles about that. So, different view.
So I don't know if you guys have talked about it in that big mess of things, but the other thing that you were going to bring up is Blaire's bullying. Was that the Riley Dennis thing, basically?
Well, it's a Riley Dennis thing. It's also just a persistent habit you have. I mean, you don't do it comes up in different ways. You used to make videos like the one about Dakota Hendricks or Milo Stewart. These people, you have. You seem to, I mean, and to be fair, like the reason you seem to do this seems to come from some sense that these people are appropriating trans identities or something like that. But that's the one most charitable interpretation of it. Otherwise, it seems like you're simply holding them up as freaks to be laughed at. So there's that. Then there's the persistent attacks on people's first personal appearance. The fact that Zinnia Jones made a very carefully worded researched refutation of some of your points about trans children, and you responded by attacking her teeth. This just seems to me like it's petty high school bully behavior.
And here's how I see it. I very rarely, I don't think I've ever just straight up gone to someone's looks out of nowhere without provocation. I don't think I ever have. When it came to making the joke about her teeth, it was after she said that I was enacting trans genocide. Is that a little worse than making fun of someone's yellow teeth? I don't know. I think that kind of is. I think
that Xenia was making a good faith judgment about your the intellectual substance of your videos. I think you responded with an attack on her personal.
Okay. Calm down.
Think that her saying that I was enacting trans genocide reflected good judgment? Did you use the word
trans genocide in that video?
Not, I'm talking about on Twitter. That was when I talked about her teeth, was on Twitter. Actually, I probably did do it in the video as well. But the reason why I don't respect Xenia Jones is because she constantly accused me of crazy shit like that. Crazy shit like you are killing trans people, trans genocide. That's why I don't respect her.
Okay, guys, wait, you're talking at the same time.
Okay, to me, I think to most rational people, accusing someone of supporting genocide or, like she said, enacting genocide is a little bit worse than saying you got yellow teeth. Okay, so that's the way I see it. That people are constantly making these insane, hyperbolic, like just horrible things said to me, and then I respond with, "Well, your teeth are gross." Which is worse? I mean, which are you really going to have an issue?
So here's how I understand the genocide comment. I take it that this is a reference to your opposition to children transitioning and your comments suggesting things like that there ought to be a cure for transgenderism, or that there should be, that you wish there should be some kind of cure. Yeah, well, so that sounds like you wish to eliminate the existence of trans people, which could, so the term genocide is almost always hyperbolic, but it does in this case describe, this is the position that she's critiquing. And to me, it's a good faith critique that she's giving of you. And then you're responding not by denying the critique, by attacking her physical appearance, which is like, this is just not the you're saying that equivalent things.
You're saying that I should seriously engage her when she says that I'm enacting genocide, that I should really pick that apart and really respond, like an adult to someone saying that I enact genocide. What that
how would you respond to the accusation that you want to eliminate trans people?
What? That's like saying that I want a cure for autism, and that means I want to eliminate autistic people. You know what? I actually would greatly enjoy if gender dysphoria was wiped off the planet and no one had to suffer with it, because there's a very small amount of people who actually transition and can actually alleviate their dysphoria. Most people suffer with this, and a lot of people kill themselves over it. So yes, I do want a cure. I do want another option that isn't, transition. Transition is very faulty. It's very faulty. That's not me wanting to eliminate them as people or enact genocide. That's me saying, you know what? It would really be great if people didn't have to struggle with their gender because we had something that cured that. But then, but you see how it gets twisted by people who are so dedicated to their perception that I'm the fucking Antichrist, that because I want a cure to stop people from their suffering, that means I want to eliminate them and destroy them. That's so fucking ridiculous. And then for you to say that I should, that was good judgment or well measured and I should really engage with that idea, I think it's ridiculous. I don't have to engage with someone who thinks that I'm fucking a Nazi, I guess. That's ridiculous. I don't have to prove I'm not a Nazi.
I guess I just think that if you examine the belief, there's at least something to it that's beyond. I don't think it's an entirely frivolous accusation. I mean, I think that the point stands that. So again, I understand that you're saying that you want to eliminate gender dysphoria. Yes, gender dysphoria is bad, and it'd be good to get rid of that. But to say that the idea of doing that, if you say these statistics about trans suicide and so on, I mean, how much of these cases often comes from simply the difficulty of living as trans in a society that's very prejudiced against them. So to say the solution is let's just because it seems that the activism should be focused on acceptance for trans people and not on saying, oh, I wish that we could just get rid of this.
Why can't we do both though? That's like saying that you can't simultaneously fight for people to be kind to autistic people and also look for a cure. How about we do both? That'd be great. That would be great, because actually insisting on this, just be kind and just accept people and don't worry about it, it's all normal, everything's fine, that actually leads to political correctness, which leads to there not being any research into a cure, which exacerbates all the suffering. Gender dysphoria is a bitch. I don't know if you experience dysphoria. It's a bitch. It can be very debilitating. There was a point in my life where it was just fucking my life up, okay? And that's why I transitioned. But when I transitioned, I was 20 years old, right? I have been lucky that I haven't developed that many male secondary sex characteristics. I'm a short person. I'm not a 6'5" linebacker with a rug on their back, body hair, okay? I was very lucky. But that's not the case with a lot of people. You can't tell me that 6'5" linebacker transitioning, they're going to live a good life and that's fine. No, I would love for there to be. I would love for there to be.
Wait, let Blaire finish really quick.
My point is, I would love for there to be something else for that person, that individual who's sitting there at 6'5", trying to live the life as a woman. They never will. It'll probably just exacerbate their dysphoria because they'll never be able to enter any spaces and be perceived as a woman. So if there was an alternative, that would be amazing. But you guys turn it around that I want to fucking eliminate trans people because I want a cure for their suffering. That's so ridiculous. It's so fucking ridiculous.
A lot of trans people don't experience. So I understand that that is some trans people's experience.
Let Contra go now.
But many trans people do not experience their condition of being trans as a permanent, like, life-ruining affliction of some kind.
Many do.
Maybe many do, but many also don't. And so for the people who don't, the people who actually seem to have found peace with their gender identity and enjoyed themselves, the suggestion that they should be other than they are seems like a sort of attack on their identity. So it's got, I mean, you have to at least see why this is an issue that people are sensitive about.
Dude, there are people who find peace with the fact that they're dying of cancer too and can peacefully just slip away. People can find peace with it, but it's still a lot of suffering for a lot of fucking people. And even those people who find peace for it, at one point they are probably suffering really badly. Why is a cure, wanting a cure is, even Sarah Meyer said this, that me wanting a cure means that I advocated for conversion therapy. And it's like, it's so fucking ridiculous. It's like, the way I feel is that you guys are so dedicated to this perception that I am a hater, that I hate trans people, that I, like, it's so ridiculous. You guys can't see me as a normal person who just has a fucking opinion.
Well, I just don't think having an opinion is like a defense of the opinion. I mean, I'm attacking.
No, it's not. But it's not. But it's also not. You can't also take that and go straight to that opinion means she wants to fucking kill trans people. You also can't do that.
I'll grant that people take things too far when they criticize statements like that. But I do at least. So the point I'm making is that I do think at least there's a point there worth engaging with. That's not simply.
No, there's not. No,
not simply justified by retaliating by personal attacks.
There's no point engaging with someone who thinks that I'm fucking enacting genocide. That's pretty fucking ridiculous. I wouldn't. That's why I didn't. That's why I just said your teeth are fucked up.
But what have like Riley Dennis and Dakota Hendricks and Milo Stewart done to deserve this treatment?
What was the worst thing I said to Dakota Hendricks, the guy with the safety pin in his nose?
Well, it was just I found it a mean-spirited video responding to a person.
Yeah, it was bitchy. It was bitchy. I make bitchy videos sometimes.
Yeah, but it was a person who was earnestly pleading for respect, and your response to that was to sort of encourage.
No. It was an authoritarian making a heated video about how cis people are stupid and they have to bow to his every whim, and if they don't, then they're a bigot. That's what that video was, and I take issue. With authoritarianism surrounding the conversation of transgenderism, because that's not actually how you gain acceptance. You gain acceptance by building bridges, not by saying, these are my terms, abide by them, or you're a fucking bigot. That's not how it works, okay? And I think the amount of people who comment on my channel saying, and I'm not trying to big myself up, but I have a lot of people who comment on my channel saying that their only perception of trans people was the Riley Dennises, was the Milo Stewarts, was the Dakota Hendrickses. And they had a horrible fucking perception of them. Okay, so I don't understand. Like, I make bitchy videos. If that's the worst thing that you can like say, I don't know. I make bitchy videos. I admit to that.
Again, this idea that these people are authoritarians, in my experience,
they are. They support laws that
have an activist who is so again, I can also understand if it's a critique of of methods as an activist. Yes, it's probably not good activism to go around accusing everyone of being bigot the minute they fuck anything up. Agreed. But in my experience, people who are like that generally lower the defenses very quickly if you show them a little bit of kindness and make some attempt to understand and empathize with them. And instead, I find you just encouraged outright hostility towards a person like that. And I just don't think that's like I don't know. I don't think that's a good kind of YouTube video to make. I don't see what good that does in the world. It just seems like it's being mean to people for recreation and for entertainment. And I don't think that's a noble thing to do.
Listen, I have always I will say, I think the meanest thing I've ever done was place a picture of Voldemort over Riley Dennis's Adam's apple. But even with that, if that's the meanest thing I've ever done, or the most spiteful thing I've ever done, I don't think I'm that bad. I guess that's just my perception of myself. I don't think it's that bad. I think that people sitting and making videos talking about how fucking white people are scum, cis people are scum, everyone's racist, I think that's actually a little worse than like the jokes I crack about people. I think that's worse. I think when you accuse someone of being, like, to me, when I think of an actual transphobic person, an actual racist person, that's a horrible fucking thing to be called. I wouldn't ever want to be called that by anyone who actually knew what that word meant. Your side tends to really exaggerate what the fuck that word means, but so I don't care much anymore. But there was a time when I really didn't want to be called that because it actually is a horrible thing to be. Okay.
Well, so this goes back to one of the oldest debates we have.
Wait,
part of
Contra, just let her finish that.
Just 1 second. So my perception is that your side will come at me accusing me of all the worst things you can be in the world, right? A transphobe, a racist, a bigot, just horrible things. You can accuse me of enacting transgenocide. But if I make a video cracking a joke about you, that's what you take issue with. Which is really worse? Which is worse, Contra? Like, I honestly want to know which one you think is worse.
I just think it's a misunderstanding of, for instance, so again, I've been talking about this for a long time, but it's what I saw with the whole Milo Stewart episode, for instance, is Milo, who was 17 at the time, made a video in which he said, you know, all white people are racist, we've all heard the refrain. And people reacted to that as if what Milo was alleging was like, oh, all white people are Klansmen, and so they react, you know, but to me that's disingenuous because clearly that's not what Milo was saying, right? Clearly there's good sense and there's good, I mean, this is a very like academic way of using the term, is that there's all kinds of racial prejudices and gender prejudices that people have that aren't tantamount to moral monstrosity. So in a sense, being told that you're racist or that you're doing something racist is, in that sense, it's not the worst thing in the world. It's simply a criticism of your preconceptions and beliefs, and something that, in order to sort of think about these issues responsibly, live responsibly, is something that we should all be engaged in self-reflection about. So that kind of, you know, I think that there's really something to be gained by not being so offended by the charge of racism. I mean, I understand that in your case, people do criticize you in very harsh terms that I understand are not, it's not easy to just to not get defensive when someone's coming at you like that. I know, I mean, people have come at, I mean, I have been in leftist circles for a long time. People have come at me with this same strategy, and I've gotten defensive too. So I get it, I do. But I also think that upon reflection, like, is like hitting back against the Milo Stewarts with everything you've got, like, is that really, it just seems like, I don't know. It just seems to me like not a productive approach.
First of all, I haven't made a video about Milo for a long time. Yeah. And as recent as a week ago, I actually was in a stream talking about how I don't want to talk about Milo in videos anymore because I actually feel bad about the amount of shit Milo gets. And I feel like Milo is in a very unhealthy state of mind. Okay, so that's the first thing. I think the last video I made a response, I think I've made one response video to Milo a year ago. And it was her crazy video. It was her video about how to be a trans ally. And I'm sorry, but I feel like as a trans person, if you're trying to educate people on how to be an ally to me, I can fucking respond to that. I mean, yeah. It just boils down to what you and I think is a worse thing. You think that me making fun of someone's teeth or me calling Milo Stewart a lawn gnome is worse than being called a racist, someone who believes that their race is fucking superior, or being called a Nazi. Like, is it really much worse you can be called in the world than a Nazi? I mean, you implied before the stream that this was just going to be a tranny fight to entertain the Nazis that watch my channel.
My comment on that was based on, I mean, I don't know if you saw the live chat on your stream with Lacey Green, but it was a wall of swastikas.
Well, that's just because 4chan found it. So.
Yeah,
no, I mean, it was rated by 4chan, and these people are fucking LARPing as Nazis. There are no Nazis that watch my channel. There just isn't, like, there's no Nazis watching my channel. I can honestly, like, feel pretty confident in saying that.
I don't know. If there's any Nazis in the audience, let us know.
Well, now everyone's going to say they're Nazis. So.
Blaire is enacting genocide against you.
Okay.
But like I said, it just comes down to what each of us thinks is worse. Like, your side throws, like, the most heinous fucking words at me. I mean, but if I call you a lawn gnome or your teeth are yellow,
wait.
Yeah.
Guys, okay. So, is there anything else besides this, because I don't think this is going anywhere.
Yeah, okay. We wanted to talk about children transitioning. That was one of the other.
Yeah, we can touch on that. I mean, so what I'll say about this, I think that your characterization of children transitioning was, I mean, I basically agree. I don't have a whole lot to say that Zinnia Jones hasn't already said. I agree with most of her criticisms of you. I think that you, in your particularly where you went wrong was using the word child abuse to describe parents who are following what are the conventional psychiatric guidelines for transgender kids, and also the implication that it's true that I don't think you ever actually said that puberty blockers cause sterility, but in the implication that very, very young children are making this decision when in fact cross-sex hormones are not generally used at an age of 12 or anything. But puberty blockers
what is
seem
very
to be
young to you, though?
Yeah.
Like, what is very young to you? That needs to be defined before we even talk about this. What is very young to you?
I mean, my understanding is that cross-sex hormones are usually started around age 16, which is young, yes, but when you weigh against the risk of not doing it, I mean, to me, it's not just simply like, oh, you're sterilizing kids for no reason. I mean, it's to get a huge benefit, right? So
I mean, it's a huge perceived benefit.
Yeah.
That it's perceived to be that, but
well, I mean, so that's what matters, though, right? It's
no.
how it's perceived by the person.
No, because perceptions change, and your sense of identity changes throughout life. And even 16, like, dude, there are doctors who will not tie the tubes of women at age 18 because it's fucking unethical and irresponsible for someone at 18 to decide they don't want to have kids. I mean, that's really what we're talking about. We're talking about, yes,
but those people don't also have.
Contra, just let her finish. Sorry.
Puberty blockers do not sterilize you, okay? I've never said that. Everyone loves to say I said that. I have never said that. I've never said that puberty blockers stop someone from being able to have kids. That is cross-sex hormones. However, oops, sorry, move my mic. However, why would I support puberty blockers if I don't support cross-sex hormones? It's not like you can be on puberty blockers until 18, 19, which I think is the actual appropriate age transition. So why would I support someone stalling their puberty and refusing to develop naturally?
Because puberty blockers buy you the time to make the decision. So again,
but you can only be on them for so long. You can't be on them until you're an adult.
Your comparison of taking cross-sex hormones to having your tubes tied is not a good comparison, because having your tubes tied doesn't buy you. No, because it doesn't buy you anything else besides infertility. Whereas if you are a transgender and under threat of going through the wrong puberty, it's a huge benefit to you.
But that's such a weird statement, the wrong puberty. Like, there's not a wrong puberty. It's just...
It is if you think... I mean, you're the one who places so much emphasis on how important physical transition is. I don't understand why you don't empathize with the need for some people. Why to some people it's horrifying to have to watch your body turn into what to you is the wrong gender, the wrong sex.
I can absolutely empathize, okay? I can. Shocker, I can empathize. When I look back at my life when I was 13 or 14 and I started developing in a way that I, didn't enjoy, it was actually pretty upsetting. I was upset, okay? It actually did cause turmoil in my life. However, my sympathy doesn't extend so far that I think that, 13 years old is a good time to decide, well, you know what? I am going to permanently alter my body. I am going to decide now.
13. I don't think 13-year-olds generally
you can go on hormones. You can go on hormones as soon as 13. I have supporters of mine who I'm in group chats with, like multiple trans kids, and they are 14, 15, and they are on hormones. So that is a thing.
I mean, so when it comes to hormones, I acknowledge that there does seem to be a genuine medical controversy about when to start that and how good of an idea it is.
And for good reason.
But puberty blockers, it seems to me, as young as is necessary, it just seems that there's no good reason not to start those simply as a matter of buying time in order to make the decision with the most mature information.
No, I think
possible.
there is. I think there is, because what happens if, like, you can't be on puberty blockers till you're 18. Like, they don't keep you on them till 18.
I'm not sure.
You're literally stalling your.
Guys, don't talk over each other.
I was talking, so I should be able to finish this part.
Okay, go.
So, like I said, you can't be on until 18. So why would I support someone stalling their development, stalling their puberty until the age of 18? Like, no, so I don't support either.
I mean,
puberty blockers are the puberty
but what reason do you have for not supporting it besides a kind of gut intuition? I mean, this is the medical consensus. This is what people who really study this issue have agreed on. And it seems to me that you should have more than just a kind of like appeal to common sense as to why this is not a good idea.
Well, first of all, there's nothing wrong with common sense. Second of all, like I said, puberty blockers are the stepping stone to hormones. There's no reason to take them other than, you know, I'm going to figure out if I'm going to go on hormones. Okay.
But so some people do take puberty blockers.
Okay.
I have to finish it. Like I was talking. Like.
Yeah, let her talk.
So why would I support someone stalling their puberty if I wouldn't support them going through the other sex's puberty until they're at least an adult? There would be no point to me supporting that. You can't be on it till 18, so you're going to go through puberty regardless. So why would I support it? It wouldn't make any sense. It wouldn't make any. It would be inconsistent.
Under no circumstances would you support a 16-year-old going on cross-sex hormones.
Say that again.
Under no circumstances would you support a 16-year-old going on cross-sex hormones.
Well, this is the part where there's nuance. I think that there are crazy extreme cases.
But calling it child abuse is not nuanced. That is a very serious. I mean, no. The kind of exaggeration you're complaining about with the trans.
No, it's not an exaggeration at all. Would you consider allowing a 14-year-old, a 13-year-old to decide they don't want to have kids at that age to not be child abuse? That's child abuse to me.
That they decided that because they wanted to be the gender that psychiatric consensus had agreed that this was the right treatment for. Again,
yes, it's because
there's no psychiatric consensus that you can sterilize yourself.
I understand that it's not a pill solely taken to sterilize you. However, it's a guarantee that if you take it, it will sterilize you. It's kind of like saying kids need to be on antidepressants and they should be able to take this drug. It'll blind them, but it's better than them killing themselves because they're depressed. That's what it is. Yes, it's a side effect, but it's an actual thing. It's a guarantee. If anything, it's not even a side effect. It's an effect. Side effects usually
also increasingly it's possible for people to
hold on.
Reproductive material.
Hold on. Wait, guys. Wait, hold on. Ready? Blaire, finish your sentence and then let Contra go.
The sterility is not even like a side effect because side effects are usually there's like a chance of it occurring. You read the back of the box, you know, a chance of depression or a chance of this. It's actually guaranteed. If you go on hormones, you can't have kids.
I mean, there are trans men who get pregnant. Again, this point was made in Zinnia's video, is that specifically trans people who go on hormones are advised not to assume that they're infertile because they may not be. But it's also
listen.
Wait.
It's all
there are chances.
Wait.
Okay.
Contra, just finish what you were saying and then Blaire go. Sorry, you guys are so heated.
It's also the case that increasingly people are able, if they choose to, they can store gonads or they can store other reproductive material when they go on hormones, so that if
not
14-year-olds they have. Well, why not 14-year-olds?
Because because you have them on puberty blockers, they never sexually developed to be fertile, so they never had the opportunity ever. So you can't save your sperm if you were never able to actually produce sperm.
But again, it just seems to me here that, like, so you say there's nuance. I agree, and on some of these issues there is room for very genuine disagreement. But it seems to me that calling this child abuse, especially in consideration of the fact that the medical consensus is that this is the right course of action for transgender teenagers.
This is a very new phenomenon. There are no long-term studies that show a person at 30, 40 years old who transitioned at 12, 13 years old and how their life ended up, because it just has never happened. This is very new. Second of all, I'm going to just give you some numbers right here. This is a big concern of mine. This is something that I think a lot about as someone who's very involved in these conversations, okay? There's a recent huge, never before seen surge of kids being referred to gender clinics to get referrals to medically transition. Huge. Stephen Stathis, psychiatrist who runs a children's hospital that doubles as a gender clinic in Australia, says he's seeing a large uptick in kids coming in and treating it as a trend, describing it as trans is the new black. In Nottingham, there's been a 28-fold increase in referrals in the past 8 years. It's really huge. In London, the referrals have quadrupled in the past decade. That's concerning for me because we have a society that in many ways, maybe you disagree with me, but in many ways treats this as though it is, you know, extremely arbitrary. And, you know, if you have any varying levels of masculinity and femininity, you're a new gender. And trans is seen as very trendy right now. And if I have a moment of self-awareness, I would even imagine that part of my success as a YouTuber and as a commentator is because this is a hot topic right now. It's very popular. There are a lot of kids watching a lot of trans kids on YouTube. There are a lot of kids seeing trans people on TV, a lot of kids witnessing all this virtue signaling about transgenderism. And I think that contributes in large part to the amount of kids who now think that they are transgender. I really do.
Two responses.
And that's concerning for me.
One, isn't it possible that the sudden increase in referrals has to do with sudden awareness of trans people that didn't exist before? And might it not be the case that many of these kids are kids who are in fact transgender and simply wouldn't have been denied treatment before due to a lack of awareness?
No,
Two,
there's
why do you assume that medical professionals will not be able to distinguish between people who have gotten the idea from TV or are doing it some part of some kind of trend? And people
that's the thing. Many of them are able to distinguish, which is why the person I talked about just now, Stephen Sathis, said that he's seeing a shitload of people coming in, bringing their kids in, and the kids talk about it like, I want to transition because I saw this person on YouTube. A kid described it as trans is the new black. I want to transition to this doctor. So yes.
This is why for children who want to do this, it's important to have medical gatekeepers. We do have those medical gatekeepers.
Let me finish. There's absolutely room to say, yeah, there's stuff, you know, there's a little bit of an increase because, you know, people are more accepting now, and that's the thing. And of course, that's part of it. But I think that a large part of it is also this treating as a trend, treating as though it's cool. You know, expanding the definition of trans so that if you consider yourself non-binary, you can get on hormones and transition to, you know, a middle ground. Or people are constantly expanding the definition as well, which is why more people are seeing themselves within that umbrella, within that definition. Because right now the definition of it is basically limitless. So of course there's going to be more people thinking they're transgender. And what's dangerous is the fact that these are kids. These are kids. And honestly, to me, the conversation should end at the kid deciding at 14 they don't want to have kids. Because you can say you can save your sperm, but you never let them develop to actually be fertile. So you have a 13-year-old boy who's been on puberty blockers since 11, and then they're to go on hormones. They never developed. So you can't do that. Like, you're deciding at that age to never have kids. And I'm sorry, but kids are a huge part of life. I didn't want kids when I was a teenager. And now I'm 23 and I'm kind of thinking, damn, I would like to have a family someday. What sucks is that I've transitioned and I'm now sterile. So I can never have a child of my biological, I can never have a kid through conventional means. Okay. So you're telling me that I transitioned at 20 and I even didn't really think about it. You're telling me that this 14-year-old has the capacity to say, I don't ever want to have kids. I think that's psychotic. I think it is abusive. So no, I don't think it's hyperbolic for me to say that's abusive. I think allowing a kid to make that type of decision is abusive.
Okay, one, you said a while ago that you think that you're very concerned about all these kids showing up because of this trendy idea of what it is to be trans. Why is that a concern if there are medical gatekeepers in place who are able to distinguish between people who are doing it as part of a trend?
Because in large part, the science...
Blaire, just let him finish. It says
I thought he was done. Sorry.
Why, again, if the medical professionals are able to distinguish it, there's no danger of people going on hormones when they shouldn't be on hormones, or at least that the danger is not a huge part of this. The trenders will be distinguished.
But they won't. They won't, though.
Two,
did you know
the expanding definition of gender nonconformity and transgender is beneficial to people who don't fit the original transsexual category. People like me who would never have thought probably to identify as a different thing before, but who now have this option and have suddenly emboldened to live the way we want to live. That's very good for me and for people like me.
Okay.
Three, This idea, again, you continually talk about 14-year-olds sterilizing themselves as if this didn't win some other significant thing, and as if what you're saying is you're ignoring what the alternative is, which is to force them to go through the wrong puberty and to make transitioning much difficult later in life. I mean, I don't see why one of these things is abuse and one of them isn't. To say that it's completely fine to force a teenager to go through a natal puberty that they don't want to go through, but that it is child abuse to allow them to do that is the abandonment of the nuance of the question.
So are you starting to piece together why I want a cure? Because I don't want there to be this conversation about if a 14-year-old should be able to decide to sterilize themselves. That's why I want a cure. I don't want transition to be the end all be all. It's so fucking faulty. The fact that we're having this conversation is proof that it's faulty.
So do you think that a cure is not the same as conversion therapy, or you think it is?
No, I would love if there to be some type of medication, the same way you can take a medication for being depressed or, any type of other disorder.
But is there any good reason to think that that's possible? I mean, you can't medicate the gay away. That's been tried for a long time. Is there any good way?
Transsexualism, gender dysphoria is not the same thing as being gay.
I mean, it's not the same thing, but is there any good reason to think
and on a philosophical
any reason at all to think that there's a drug that will work for this? For something as complicated and integral to identity as gender identity, is there any reason to think that a drug is going to alter that?
Yes, I mean, forgive me for feeling like we could eventually get to a point where we could we're working on head transplants. You think it's not possible for us to develop a drug that alleviates gender dysphoria? What the fuck? Are you kidding? Of course we don't think
we have no promising leads, so it's not in the works anytime soon.
We have no promising leads because it's not even being looked into, because this issue is treated as transition is the only way to go.
For most of the history of psychiatry, trans people were treated as if they had a mental disease, and that was not productive.
Gender dysphoria is absolutely a mental disorder, and it's one that causes people a lot of hell in their lives, and I would love for there to be a cure. I'm not quite sure how that can be twisted the other way to mean something bad that I'm just like.
It brings up a lot of connotations of praying the gay away. Or
it's not the same thing. Someone's sexual orientation and what they want to put their dick in is not the same thing as struggling from a debilitating.
Do you have any basis?
No,
let me finish.
Sorry.
What someone wants to stick their dick in, it's not the same thing as someone who's suffering from a debilitating mental disorder that causes them to identify as the opposite sex. Okay,
that's not the basis for thinking that it's possible to medicate away gender dysphoria, but it's not possible to medicate away homosexuality.
I didn't say it's not possible. I'm sure we could really figure it out in the next couple 100 years. I'm sure we probably could. Okay. On a philosophical level, sure. If someone's struggling with the fact that they're gay, if they wanted to cure it, I don't see why they'd be denied the ability to take a pill and live their life as a heterosexual. I mean, it's a much easier life if you ask me, being a heterosexual.
But it seems to me this idea, the reason it's a much easier life is because it has to do with the way society is organized, and it's to do with social prejudice. So to speak of medication as a solution to homosexuality.
You can do both, though.
But the medication wouldn't even be necessary.
You can fight against the prejudice and treating people badly because of who they are, and also fight for a fucking cure. Okay, they're not mutually exclusive.
They seem contradictory to me, because on the one hand, saying this is a disease that we want to medicate it away, and on the other hand, you're saying this is a perfectly acceptable way to be.
Would it seem contradictory to you for me to say that I want both people to be kind to autistic people and there to be a cure for autism? Is that contradictory?
So again,
no,
I don't know that much about the people who. I don't know that much about.
Just answer though. Please just answer that question.
Can we switch for autism with depression? Something that I don't feel difficulty saying that depression is bad. So if we say, we should be respectful to depressed people, right? And we also want a cure for depression. I guess.
Yeah, same thing. Same thing.
Yeah,
why would you want people to have to be? Why would you want people to have to pay?
Just
depression is bad for reasons besides social stigma, right? It's not the organization of society that's the reason depression's bad. It's bad.
But that's the point. You can fight against both. You don't have to be an asshole to trans people, but you also don't have to say that wanting a cure is fucking transgenocide. I want there to be a cure. I don't want people to suffer with this shit. And you guys twist this into me being a bad person because of that.
But
I could just as easily.
The difference between being transgender.
Listen. I could just as easily turn this back on you and say that I think you're a bad person and you're enacting transgenocide because you want people to be restricted to a life of having to pay $100,000 to surgically alter their body, lower their lifespan because hormones do cause transsexuals to die younger than everyone else. I can just as easily turn it back on you and say you're a bad person for wanting people to have to only have that option. I want an ethical option. Transition and insisting that some people who will never pass should transition is not ethical at all. It's their best bet right now, but I wish it wasn't. I wish their best bet wasn't something that was so incredibly fucking faulty.
So I will grant that in an abstract philosophical kind of way, if there were a pill that you could take and you could give to a kid who had gender dysphoria and it would make them suddenly identify with their gender, that there would be at least a serious ethical debate to be had, and a serious ethical argument in favor of using the pill, simply because it would be easier than having them transition. However, I think that your insistence that this is a good way to talk about this issue when there's no good reason at all to think that such a treatment is possible, it would not just amount to some kind of, again, conversion therapy, essentially prolonged psychiatric torture in the way that conversion therapy traditionally has been for homosexuals. I mean, there's a reason why people react with this negative way when you say these things, and it's not because of the abstract philosophical point you're making, it's because of the real world implications of what actually trying to do that would involve.
I don't understand the terrible real world implication of me making a philosophical statement that I wish trans people didn't have to have dysphoria and that people didn't have to have dysphoria. I don't understand the ramifications of that, how that's negative at all.
I mean, again, in a completely out of context, it's not a necessarily bad thing to say. But I think in context,
so what's the context in which it becomes bad?
In the context of a history of gay conversion therapy and of a reality where there is no meaningful treatment of trans people, and where any attempts to cure away the dysphoria without transition would likely amount to being abusive.
Guys.
Yeah.
Okay. This is a shit show. Okay, so.
Is it?
I mean, we're talking.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's good. It's just, is there another thing to talk about? This is a little crazy. I don't know how to moderate this.
I'm honestly approaching my level of exhaustion with this, where I might have to go soon. I can talk about something else, but I find that I'm running out of steam a little bit.
Okay, so Blaire, do you have a topic?
Is there anything else to talk about on your end? Contra?
You know, I feel that I've said my piece.
Okay. I'll be honest, I don't feel like I've really, I guess I've gained a little bit of understanding of your views on me and my channel, but I can't say that I was swayed in any way.
I was not swayed either, but I do feel that I maybe have a little more understanding of where you're coming from than I did.
Okay. Yeah, I guess. I guess that wraps it up. Actually, Contra, you can leave if you want to, if you're exhausted. I mentioned in the description that I would answer super chat questions at the end of the stream. So I'm going to do that. Although the question might be for you if you want to stick around. I don't know. Like it could be a question.
Okay, I'll stick around in case there's a question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What, you?
No, yeah, that's a good idea. Like, stick around for questions. Do you want me to read them to you guys?
Only I can see the list of super chats in my analytics, so I'm gonna have to go do that, and I won't read any of like crazy ones or ones that are super insulting to anyone. I'm not gonna do that. But
do you want me to leave?
Okay.
Should I stay?
The Thought Apostate says, exactly right, BlaireWhite. YouTube has spread transgenderism as a trend. People seem to forget that seeing kids were a thing. Like most of the public won't let their kids get tattoos or drink public, but cross-sex hormones are somehow okay. Any thoughts on that, Contra?
Oh God, I think that comparison between genderqueer or non-binary children and seen kids is very inaccurate. I mean, seen is a fashion movement, whereas being non-binary involves all kinds of things: how you relate to your body, how you want to have sex. I mean, I just don't think I don't think this is a fair character. I don't think this is a fair comparison.
I mean, it's not a perfect comparison, but if you're just honing in on the fact that it's treated as a trend, I think it's fair. And then the part about not letting your kids get tattoos, but permanently altering their bodies in other ways. Again, it's different, but I don't think it's entirely unfair. But,
by getting a tattoo, you're not developing the body of the sex that you feel that you are. So that's a big distinction.
Well, yeah, it's a different thing, but at the end of the day, it's letting a minor alter their body. So there's a link. Okay. Jessica Ustas, thank you. She says, puberty is a massive shift in human growth, and to stop or stall this is really screwed up. Bones, organs, brain, everything stops growing, and doing this to a kid is horribly disturbing. Take some biology courses. I completely agree with that. Even cross-sex hormones, you're really fucking with the bone density of a male to female transsexual. And so to do that at such a young age when you're developing, I would agree with that entirely.
I mean, women, we let natal women go through puberty without worrying that much about bone density. I mean, you also have an increased breast cancer risk for taking estrogen, but that doesn't mean having a daughter is immoral.
No, it's not. But I'm pretty sure that it's exacerbated when it's a male to female transsexual and putting your body through that. I don't think it's the same thing as naturally going through puberty. But let me see this. Someone says, forcing someone to use certain words that make you feel better will not change their biases. You will only make them dislike you more. Be reasonable. Thoughts?
Sorry, say that again.
Forcing someone to use certain words. This is a super chat. Forcing someone to use.
Again, what does forcing mean? I mean, asking them to is not the same as forcing them. I don't know that many people who are at gunpoint are required to use the right pronouns.
No, they're a lot of these activists that they're referring to do support laws requiring that people not misgender people in the workplace. And at the end of the day, what is a law? It's follow this. It's a gun to your head. It's follow this or lose your life. That's what it is.
I think that it's reasonable to ask employees to be respectful to each other in the workplace.
There's asking, and then there's enforce. I mean, it's not just calling someone he or she.
It's reasonable to require employees to be respectful to each other in the workplace.
Yeah, but I think it becomes unreasonable when you start including things like Z and Zer and all those, which are included in those laws. It's not just binary pronouns. And I'm sorry, but outside of this circle, which often debates these things, 99% of people have never heard of that. And so I think it's a bit unreasonable to expect that people follow that, or I think businesses would get fined $100,000, like ruin someone's life in business over that. That's pretty extreme.
I think this is a disingenuous point that people make to pretend that people asking them to use the right pronouns is forcing them to.
Asking,
and then they talk about these laws that are mostly hypothetical as evidence of a thing that's completely separate.
Laws aren't hypothetical. If it's a law, it's a law. If you're required to use a certain pronoun, so less face huge fines and send your business under, that's not asking. That's enforceable.
I mean, it's kind of, I think it comes down to who do we want to favor? Do we want to favor transphobes, or do we want to favor trans people in the workplace? Which one? I mean, they can't coexist very well without some kind of requirement about how they get along.
No, they
so you have to kind of decide.
It's not just a matter of being transphobic. Yeah. That's where it comes down to the real life situation. People are going to slip up, and people slipping up violates the law.
I'm not aware of any proposed law that says that accidental slip up is subject to a fine. I think these refer to harassment that involves deliberate, consistent
No. It's specifically, it's not to do with harassment. It's specifically about pronouns.
If there is a law that illegalizes the accidental slip up of pronouns, please send me a link to it, somebody. I've never heard of such a thing.
Okay, I can get back to you in the GMs. There was a situation in New York and also some shit in Canada, and I will link that to you afterwards. But let me get through these. There's a lot of super chats. I'm skipping some that aren't questions, or if they're like, Blaire, I'm going to suck your dick or something, like those are ridiculous. Someone says, Blaire is white. You can't just force people to refer to you the way you wish they do. This is not how you build bridges. No need to comment on that, I guess. Racial bias from Bethany. Racial bias is not racism. Racism is not racial bias. Language matters. Learn the language. I think that's absolutely true. Your point to how there's a middle ground between bias and a moral monstrosity, such as being a Nazi or something. We were talking about Milo Stewart's video. I don't think that Milo actually made that distinction. I think Milo went straight to racist, and I do think there's a difference between having biases and being racist, because being racist is viewing your race as superior to another, which if you just have prejudices and biases, that doesn't necessarily entail being racist. Everyone has their prejudices and biases. It's a matter of how you act on them and respecting people.
I would agree that was not the best wording in Milo's video, but I also think that Milo intentionally did clarify what was meant and did include himself in the bracket of racist, transphobic people. And I think that to interpret him as therefore saying that he himself was a raving Nazi is a weirdly uncharitable way to interpret that.
I mean, I don't think anyone interpreted it that way. I don't think.
I mean, a lot of people deliberately, I think, misinterpreted him that way. I don't remember, Blaire. I don't remember your video about it very well, but I know like the Amazing Atheist, for instance, did go with that interpretation.
Well.
But what are you gonna do about him?
Let me keep going. Someone said Blaire shouldn't be offended by being called a racist, but your side can be offended by ordinary jokes. That was my point, that you guys can call me the worst of names, but if I make fun of your teeth, I'm the anti-Christ.
To me, that's not an ordinary joke. That's specifically designed to humiliate someone. I don't think that's a joke. So to me, humor involves.
I would argue that publicly declaring someone as a racist is purposely designed to humiliate them, ruin their social standing. It's often very much weaponized. I don't think many people.
Not if it's a good faith critique of your behavior. I mean, it could be used that way, but I don't think.
But like I said, me enacting transgenocide is not a good faith critique. So.
Well, we've already been over this.
Well, I know, but we went back to it. We went to the Zinnia Jones thing.
Yeah.
Someone said, I've attempted suicide because I couldn't deal with dysphoria from within, not because society pushed me to do it. Dysphoria and depression self-loop. I would agree with that. Would you?
I mean, I'm not going to disagree with someone's experience.
Okay.
As I said, I think that, I mean, we've already covered the debate about whether or not talking about a cure is a good thing. But I don't wish to imply by saying that I'm uncomfortable with talking about conversion therapy. I don't wish to imply that I think that being transgender is an easy thing for people, or that dysphoria isn't intensely unpleasant. I do, of course, agree that it can be.
Okay. Someone said, Shu, you're a great moderator, and Blaire, you're amazing. So there's something for Shu.
Oh.
Thanks. I feel I did such a bad job. I was too nervous to say anything.
No, you were fine. No, you were good, because when we got a little too heated, you would jump in and we would cool down. So you did really well.
Every time one of you would speak over each other, I was like, wait, sorry. Wait, let him go. Sorry.
I know. I was like, what's she saying sorry for? This is her job.
Yeah. Do you want me to leave, by the way? Do you still need me to mod?
You can do what you want.
Okay.
The second you leave, we start screaming at each other. No.
Yeah. No, I'll just quietly chill.
Someone said, you don't get to be the sole arbiter of your identity. Your identity is based on your attributes and character, as well as other people's perception of you. You can't force people to call you honest as you lie and steal from them. That is an amazing point. That's a great point. That's my point about Riley in a nutshell. You can't do one thing and expect people to perceive you as something else.
But is the point, I mean, the point is not about how people perceive you, right? It's because it's not simply about, we don't go around saying, I think this, it's all about, it's not like this is like a very solipsistic or egocentric idea about what you call other people or how you treat other people. I just trust all my first perceptions and I don't listen to what anyone else's psychological state is. I mean, that's seems like.
But I mean, that's what I do with Riley. I go off of my registry of Riley in my mind. I don't go off of his psychological state. But
I'm saying that's like an intensely egocentric way to behave towards other people because it only trusts your own feelings and doesn't take into consideration anyone else's.
Okay. No, again, I don't want to like argue about we've trying to get through the.
Yeah, we've been through it. I can leave if it will help you get through it.
Someone says, I've said it before and I said it again, people get way too hung up on semantics. I think that is the case. I think a lot of this argument was semantics. Let me see. Someone said there is no genetic possibility to biologically be a different sex. Okay, the rest of them seem to just be little shit posts. So I guess that is the end of our live stream. I do thank you for coming on, Concha, because I try really hard to get people on, and most people say no. And you were reserved at first and necessarily didn't want to do it at first, but you did, and I commend you for that. So.
All right. Well, thanks for having me on to challenge you. Sorry.
Yep. And thank you to Shu, and good night, everyone. Bye, guys.